Kicking off a new message series today called Money Works. Last weekend we talked about I love my job, and some of you actually do, which was nice. I heard from many people who were like, I love my job, I love my job. And truly our belief is that every Christ follower should love their job, right? Because we're working for the Lord, and we get paid for that. So it's amazing. Like you think I'm the only one that works for God? Actually, you work for God at your place of employment. And that should motivate you to work extremely hard and make your employer money. And that's your job, right? So you're going to make. Now, I often thought it was like, I know you love your job, but do people who work with you love you, right? Like, love working with you? That's the big question, right? And if they don't love working with you, that's a problem. So we tried our best to figure out how to solve that problem of loving because we spend a lot of time doing that, right? Today, we're kicking off a message series about money, and we truly think about money all the time. Some of you are thinking about it right now. Some of you have looked in your wallet this morning. So like, oh, what are we going to do for lunch? When do I get paid? You're trying to figure that stuff out all the time. And I truly come from a long line of people who have wanted to hit it big. I remember my grandpa, when he would come and visit us in Arizona, he always wanted to go out into the desert and look for gold. He was convinced that if he could just keep his face down long enough, he'd eventually stumble onto the lost Dutchman mine, which he truly believed would give him vast amounts of money and provide for generations to come. I took him out every single time he came and visited me. All we found was dirt. It was basically, if you've never been to Arizona, think of kitty litter everywhere. That's what it's like to live in the desert. And so Grandpa would try to find gold. He never did find gold. And I picked up on that. My strategy was not to find gold, but find a Mickey Mantle baseball card, right? So when I was a kid, I was buying baseball cards at Woggy Drug in Lincoln, Nebraska. My goal was to find cards that were extremely valuable. I have boxes, by the way, of baseball cards that are worth almost nothing. Truly, my wife is not happy about it. I have a special room for them. It's called the closet, right? And so that's where I store my vast amount of wealth and riches that someday, somehow, they'll be worth money. They won't be, but I keep thinking of that. A few years, in fact, when I was a kid, in the catalogs that I would look at, my favorite thing, I told my parents this, they never got it for me for Christmas, which just tells you a whole lot about my mom and dad. I wanted a metal detector. I thought if I had a metal detector and I went out on Holmes Lake in Lincoln, Nebraska, on the beach, I would find treasure there. Or at some like old broken down farm place, all I needed to do was just like, there will be little coins there that I could find, and I would be wealthy. I had to rent one of those things a few years ago when I had gone out into the prairie to take photos of butterflies and flowers and stuff, and so I was working this maybe about 30 to 50 yards area for a few hours, and realized that when I packed up to leave that my backpack was way too light, and as I was digging into this backpack, I discovered that my most expensive lens was somewhere on the prairie. And I was very concerned about it because it's getting dark, and what happens on the prairie typically stays on the prairie, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I'm on my hands and knees looking for it, and it's expensive piece of glass. And my big concern was that I was going to have to go home and tell Linda that my 70 to 200 2.8 zoom lens is somewhere right now probably lost forever. She came up with a great idea. Let's rent a metal detector. I was all in at that moment. I loved her for that. So just like, yeah, I don't even care if I find it. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to find something even better than that. So I literally rented a metal detector the next day from some rental place. And within 15 seconds, literally, of turning that thing on, it lit up. I found my lens. And that was all I found. I got to spend a few hours, nothing out there. I was super grateful that I did find that. But it's just kind of in my DNA to find treasure. treasure. We're looking for something. We think it's money. We think that it is wealth, right? And I know some of you probably have checked out already on the message series. You're like, oh, I thought it was root beer float day. Oh, great. Okay. Well, all right. So for the next 4 weekends, we're going to take a look at this topic of money and how we're doing. Like, oh, he's talking about money again. Why every single time I go to a church, we're talking about money. Well, sorry. You know what to tell you. There's a big connection between my heart and my wallet. And I didn't come up with that idea. God certainly talks a tremendous amount about it. When people find Jesus, like, what do we do now? Like, so we see baptisms and people are like, okay, now what? When John the Baptist was preaching and the folks came and were getting baptized, they said, okay, now what do we do, John? What should our response now that we got baptized? And here's what John the Baptist told them. You should share your money with the poor, and tax collectors should not pocket extra money, and soldiers need to be content with the paycheck they get. Now, why would he tell them that? Why wouldn't he just say, hey, love each other, and that'll be cool? Now that you found Jesus, why don't you just love each other? He said, you should share your money with the poor. And tax collectors quit extorting money. And the tax are like, what? This should have been in the brochure, right? Why didn't you tell us up front that if I get baptized, I got to do something with my money? It's a bait and switch thing. When Zacchaeus turned to God, Jesus, had this conversation with Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus walks out of that luncheon with Jesus, and he says to Jesus, I'm going to give back 4 times the amount of money that I have taken from other people, and I'm going to give half of my possessions to the poor. And do you know what Jesus said to him? You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can go to heaven, right? Jesus didn't say that. You know what Jesus said to Zacchaeus when Zacchaeus says, I'm going to give half my money to the poor, and I'm going to give back 4 times the amount of money I've taken from people? Here's what Jesus said to him and to everybody that was listening. Today, salvation has come to this man. What? What? There's this massive connection between what is happening spiritually and what happens in the back of my pants, in my wallet. There's a connection there. I didn't make that up. So for the next 4 weekends, we're going to take a look at this. This weekend, we're going to take a look at the top 5 verses that have to do with money. And then next weekend, we're going to take a look at another 5 verses that have to do with money. So the top 10 verses that I picked out, I didn't do a survey, but I love these verses, and they have a lot to do with money and giving and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll talk a little bit about some spiritual issues that we have in the following 2 weekends. So here we go. Let's get it started. Proverbs 23, verse 4. Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Do you think Americans need to hear that? Absolutely we do. You know that we work 500 hours more than people in France a year. 500 hours more. And do you know how happy people in France are? They're not happy, by the way. They're grumpy people. Anyway. You ever been to a French restaurant? Those people make me nervous. Y'all have the, okay. Nobody in France is listening to this anyway, so we're all right. So I met last weekend some people from Scotland who were in Fremont, and they listen to me all the time, in Scotland. Okay. Be wise enough to know when to quit. Right? Some of us are not wise enough to know when to leave the office. When to not, right? Some of us are really, don't elbow anybody at this moment. Do not look at them. Do not go, as you. Don't do that. We all probably know, right? We don't know when to quit. Because we think this, the more I work, the more I get, right? The more I work, and we justify all that stuff, right? So, and I didn't write this, but I'm just telling you, in the blink of an eye, wealth disappears. That's why many of us will work extra hours, because we know it could go away super quickly. I got to sock it away as best I can now, for it will sprout wings and fly like an eagle. 86% of men work more than 40 hours a week, and 66% of women work 40 hours a week outside the home. I'm not suggesting that we work less, because if you love what you're doing, that's awesome. But if you are working that much because you think that wealth is going to bring you happiness, eventually you're going to relate to this verse. Eventually you're going to go, oh, yeah. Because if I work this much and I try to get this much money and I implode my marriage, or I implode my relationship with my family, or or it leads me to do some dangerous and destructive things in my life, you will eventually go, this is meaningless. All the money in the world is of no value if it implodes my relationships and my chance to worship God. Now, most of us don't set out to mess things up with our family or mess things up with our God. But eventually the stress and the pressure of having to pay for my second home that's on a lake becomes so overwhelming, right, that I can't handle it. And the thing that I thought was going to bring me relaxation, what happens when I show up at my lake house? I got to take care of all this stuff. I don't even have time to get in the boat. I'm cleaning stuff and mowing things and all of a sudden, it's Monday already. All right, hey, next weekend, all right, and we play that game. So why should I follow the advice of this verse in Proverbs? Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10. Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. Have you ever hit a financial goal? You're making more than ever. And you get to the end of the year and you review with your employer, and it goes something like this. Hey, you knocked it out of the park this year, and I want to give you the largest bonus we've ever given out in our company. And you're sitting there going, no, thank you. I don't think I need it this year. Actually, you pay me way too much. Have anybody ever said that? No, actually, we're going, thank you. I worked my tail off so I could get this. None of us, I've never had an employee say at the end of the year when a bonus check is given, I don't need it. I don't need it. Actually, what we tend to think is, can't wait for next year. If this is what happened this year, I'm going to work so much harder next year that it's going to be larger than the check I got this year, because it's not enough. I was in Lincoln yesterday for a football game, and then my mom and dad are selling the house that I grew up in, and they close in about a week or so. And so we were looking through stuff and picking up a few things, and we were driving through the neighborhood, and I said, oh man, that house right there, they used to give me the largest tip at the end of the month when I collected money for my paper route. I love that house. Yes. And you know what? They said, you get this paper here before 6 o'clock in the morning, it'll go well for you. And I made sure that, I didn't throw it on their driveway. I opened up their screen door and put it in, because I knew that at the end of the month, I was going to get a bonus of like $5. I remember doing that, totally motivated by that. And I did it every month. The real telling words in this passage is, this too is meaningless, because we have probably figured this out. He who dies with the most toys wins is a lie. It truly is. And by the way, this is written by a guy who's got more money than he can think of what to do with. Solomon was the Bill Gates of his world, he had more wealth than you can imagine. Can you imagine a life where you have so much money that you don't know what to do with? Yes, I can. I truly can. I know exactly what I would do with it. Here's what I would do. I would go to every single Meekum auction and buy cars. Any guy, right? You ever watch that show? I love that show, and I can watch reruns of that show. And every single time a car rolls on there, I say, Linda, look at that. Linda, look at that. She's like, what? I'm like, look at that. I want that. And if I had money, I know I would buy, here's what I would buy, a 1967 Mustang GT 390, and it would be mine. That was my first car, by the way, in high school, which was stupid, right, for my parents to let me buy that car. They had no clue, but it was fast. Then I would buy my second car, which is a 1966 Chevy Malibu. That was a cool car, too. All these cars that I had when I was a kid, massively more money than I can even imagine now is worth, and it kills me like, oh. But if I had enough money, I would buy that. And then you know what I would do with those cars? I'd put it in my garage in Montana, on my ranch, where trout live. I would also need a helicopter. You know, I mean, right? We can imagine doing all those things, right? I don't have a problem with that. But eventually what would happen is I'm here in my lodge in Montana going, wonder what's next. Oh, yeah. A really cool place in Arizona in the wintertime. I need one of those on a golf course with a helicopter pad. And you just can imagine. Psalm 11, or Proverbs 11, verse 4. Here's the next verse. Riches don't help on the day of judgment, but right living can save you from death. All the money in the world ain't buying you a plot of ground in heaven. All that wealth, all that accumulation, all that stuff. When you get up to heaven, he's like, hey, cool, I want to write you a check, Jesus, right now, because I want a really good spot for my 67 Mustang, right? And me, right? It isn't going to buy me anything. All the blood and sweat and tears to store up all that money won't buy me anything. Now, we know that money can't buy us love, right? We know that. It can buy us companionship, right? Have you noticed that? Like, when you put your boat in the water, what do you have? Friends. When you open up the cabin in Vail, what do you have? Friends, right? All of a sudden, but you sell that boat, where'd all my friends go? Right? We're selling our condo in Vail. What? Can I just go one more time? No, right? And so we know, right, that somehow there's that connection with that, but money won't buy us happiness, or at least lasting happiness, because happiness is so fickle. The things that mean most to us in life, money can't buy. Mark chapter 8, verse 36 says, and what do you profit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? No one sets out to lose our soul. We don't really do that. It's subtle. A few more hours here and a few more things like that, right? We pick up a few more hours, and then all of a sudden the spiritual life thing tends to take a little bit of a back seat to everything else. And here's what we say on a Sunday morning. I'm just going to veg out. I worked a lot. I don't want to. And all of a sudden, then we even think this on a Sunday morning. I'm going to go into the office here in a little bit, so I'm just going to. You're going in the office on Sunday? Well, just for a little while. And I'm not going to do it like every Sunday, but. And all of a sudden, it's just that subtle thing. And I've been around folks enough to watch that happen, and I've never heard anybody at the end of their life say, you know what, can you bring me my money? Can you just bring me my money? I want to just surround myself with my money. No, I want my family. I want my pastor. I want some people around me, right? So what's the solution? If money can't buy me happiness, it's not going to help me on the day of judgment. What's the solution to a meaningful life here on the planet? 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. So some of you are like, whew, I'm not rich, so I don't have to listen. Right? And I love these preachers like, well, compared to people in Ecuador, you are. Right. We know that, right? That's why our parents are like, you finish that or we're going to send that food to China. None of that makes sense. So, right? But we in this area of the world, like for the most part, a lot of us should be paying attention right now. Tell those who are rich what? Not to be proud and not to trust their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they'll be storing up treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. See, oftentimes, he says, tell those who are rich not to be proud or to be arrogant. You notice that, like, when you have money, or like when there's a bit of pride that comes with having wealth, or even sometimes false pride. I tweeted out this week that it's my 40th high school reunion this fall. And I hesitate to say that because people who have 40-year high school reunions are old. Right? When you were in high school and you're like, hey, your parents say, I'm going to my 40th. You're like, okay, do we need oxygen tanks for this event? What are we doing with it? Because these people are old, right? I saw pictures of people from Southeast High School in Lincoln this summer. They had their reunion already, 40th. I looked at them like, they're old. They're old. So here's what I tweeted. This year for my 40th, I am not going to lose weight, but I am going to rent a really sweet car. Why? Because when I come rolling up in my high school for my 40th, I want people to think, Mark made it. How do you like me now, right? They don't need to know that I rented it. It gives me a sense of arrogance, right? I sat yesterday at the Oscar game, best seats I've ever had, 43-yard line, 20 rows up. You know what I thought? Man, I am, look at where I'm sitting. Now, I didn't buy them, and I don't even own them. Somebody gave them to me. But when I was sitting there thinking, everybody around me thinks I'm rich. This is awesome. Ha, ha. And then I thought, I'm looking around like, how do these people get their seats? Oh, yeah. Like, what is, truly, it was a weird experience. Like, man, this is awesome. And I'm not going to tell you who I got them from, because I'm going to ask for them again. Oh, sweet. So good. So here he says, tell people who are rich not to be arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth. Put your hope in God. It's okay to have money. It really is. It's okay to have resources. It really is. But our hope will not be found in our resources. It's going to be found in our relationship with God. And then he says, tell the people who are rich to be generous and willing to share. There should be margin in our lives in which we have socked away some money so that when opportunities come, that I will be ready and willing and be generous. Otherwise, what I'm doing here with my wealth is just going to all be gone. When I face the day of judgment, everything that I own will be really won't be for much at that moment, because I can't write a check to Jesus at that moment and say, hey, Jesus, let me write you a check. It's all going to be burned up anyway. My life, my talents, my money can all be used for things to help me get ready for eternity. If you want joy on earth, an eternal payoff, discovering what the secret is to give my wealth away, to give my money away. Now, some of you are like, great. I don't know why we protest so much when it comes to preachers talking about money. I don't know why. Yeah. And again, it's not because I get a bonus check if you kick it in here. So a lot of us we protest about it. Why would talking about money and giving cause so much frustration? What if you could discover what Jesus already knew, right? when he said these words, it's more blessed to give than to receive. What if you could discover that? As your pastor, I want you to know that. It's more blessed to give than to receive. Let's pray. Thank you, God, for the money we have through the work that we do. For the paycheck that we receive, we're grateful. For some of us, we're making more money than we ever thought possible. We're a little embarrassed by it. We're trying to figure this stuff all out. What do you want me to do with all this stuff? For some of us, though, we're on a fixed income. We don't have a job. We're on some disabilities things. We're struggling. We don't even know. It's like, how are we going to manage this? What do you want me to do with all these questions that we have? But we have figured out that all the money in the world hasn't bought us one more moment of happiness. It just goes away. So if we could discover that it is more blessed to give than receive, those of us who are in Christ will be up for that. In Christ we pray.